What if I told you that Ferrari has just resurrected a weapon from the past to turn Lewis Hamilton into the new monster of the Principality? What is the Scuderia in the alleys of Monaco? The arrival of Formula One to Monaco Principality is not just an iconic appointment in the calendar. It is an emotional and strategic turning point for each team. And in 2025, this narrow, sinuous and margin circuit for errors became the perfect setting for Ferrari to start his metamorphosis. Until this point of the season, things did not paint well in Maranello. The first races had evidenced cracks in the project. In Australia, Ferrari failed to capitalize on the potential of the SF-25 and was clearly surpassed by McLaren and Red Bull, both in rhythm and in consistency. In China, although there was a slight improvement, doubts about the technical direction of the team and the effective integration of Hamilton persisted. But Monaco was different from the first minute of activity. The energy in Ferrari's boxes was another. There were no trace of the pessimism that had accompanied them. Leclerc, as if he felt the weight of the story running in his favor at home, was immediate and dominant. He broke the barrier of 1 foot 12 inches in the first practice, a psychological mile SF-25. Hamilton finished third in the FP2, and the most shocking thing was not the result itself, but how it achieved it. Clean turns, aggressive but precise paths, absolute control in the most complicated areas of the circuit, especially in lows and rasgas, where many pilots usually compromise their turns. The difference between its time and that of Leclerc was minimal, just 1/10 of a second. That was enough to light the alarms in their rivals and hope between the tifosi. Not only was he reaching his teammate, I was doing it in one of the most technical paths in the world where trust is everything. And it was that word confidence that marked this first act of transformation. During later interviews, Hamilton was lighter, more genuine. He said he had felt the pleasure of piloting again, something he had not experimented for years. And that is not a minor phrase. Because a pilot like Lewis, with 7 world championships under his credit, is not easily impressed. If he assures that he has fun as never before, it is because Ferrari has finally given him something he can fight with. What is happening with the SF-25 at the Monaco Grand Prix is not simply an improvement. It is a real reinvention. Ferrari, traditionally conservative in times of crisis, has taken a bold turn. It has reinterpreted its car not with a simple aerodynamic update, but with a conceptual reconstruction based on an unusual principle in Formula One modern look to the past to project the future. The most symbolic piece of this transformation is the rear wing. It is not new. It is the same as the SF-24 with which Charles Leclerc conquered Monaco in 2024. Ferrari has deliberately rescued it, knowing that in this circuit, where aerodynamic load and behavior in slow curves are decisive, that specific solution had already demonstrated its effectiveness. The message is clear. There is no space for the technical ego in a route where the functionality expires to empty innovation. The SF-25, which in other circuits showed weaknesses especially in traction and stability in low-speed curves, needed to adapt. And he has done it. But the wing is not the only thing. Ferrari has partially redesigned the front suspension to improve the absorption capacity in closed address changes, typical of Monte Carlo. They have adjusted the cake of the car and optimized the mapping of the differential to offer greater stability in the late braking, a common maneuver in the curves closed of the Monégasque layout. In addition, the brake balance has been modified to favor handling by Hamilton, who has historically preferred a car with greater response on the rear train. This adaptation, although less in appearance, has made a vital difference for its trust. From an aerodynamic point of view, Ferrari has also developed a specific cooling package for Monaco, limiting side pod openings and optimizing the airflow in the rear diffuser to maximize efficiency in a circuit where the speeds are low, but the thermal punishment is elevated by the lack of long lines. This intervention is crucial because it allows to maintain the compounds of Pirelli in an optimal thermal window without compromising the general performance of the car. Beyond hardware, there is invisible engineering software. Simulation. Maranello's team has invested hours in its simulation center in Maranello to refine each car settings parameter, even resorting to joint virtual sessions between engineers and pilots, something that was not always a priority in the past. This new methodology has allowed Hamilton to have a direct voice in the evolution of the SF-25, accelerating its adaptation to a machine that, until a few weeks ago, did not feel like its own. And this is where everything makes sense. Ferrari has not only transformed a car, it has transformed a relationship. The dynamic between Hamilton and his track engineer has strengthened, feedback times have been reduced, and telemetric data has ceased to be an unknown language to become a shared conversation. This level of tune is not achieved by accident. It is the result of very conscious strategic decisions. bringing external experience, actively listening to the pilot, and having the humility of returning to a past solution if that means moving forward. What emerges is a SF-25 that is not perfect, but now has a soul. A car that has learned from its mistakes and that, at least in Monaco, has become a surgical machine, precise and refined as a scalpel. Ferrari has made it clear that he is willing to play with all the tools at his disposal to make that necessary jump that separates the applicants from the contestants. When it is observed carefully what is happening in Ferrari at this precise moment of season 2025, it is clear that there is something else at stake than a simple technical evolution. What is emerging within the Scuderia is a much deeper, more structural transformation. In this act, what is raised is not just a specific resurgence. The question that many in the paddock and in the specialized media are already done is, are we facing the birth of a new era in Ferrari? The recent history of the team is marked by a constant dichotomy between potential and frustration. Seasons that began with championship promises ended up being stories of strategic errors, questionable technical decisions, and demotivated pilots. But in Monaco 2025, something has changed. And not only because the car works better. What really attracts attention is the way in which the team is operating, the internal culture that begins to leak out. Lewis Hamilton, who came to Ferrari as a commitment as emotional as strategic, has become the axis around which this transformation seems to be turning. It is not common to see Ferrari give so much control to a newly incorporated pilot. But that is precisely one of the keys. Frédéric Vasseur has understood that, in order for the team to evolve, it needs to stop functioning as a castle of watertight compartments and become a fluid organization, where pilot and engineers feed continuously. Hamilton has brought not only experience, but a new standard of demand. In each debriefing, on each simulator day, its presence has raised the level of all those around it. It is not that Leclerc has overshadowed. On the contrary, the Monegasco pilot seems to have positively reacted to this internal challenge, finding in his new partner a stimulus rather than a threat. That healthy competition has reinforced the global performance of the team. The improvement of the SF-25 is not then only a triumph of the technical department, but also a reflection of the new organizational climate that is breathed in Maranello. It is no longer about simply executing a plan, but about building a shared vision. A long-term strategy is perceived that seeks to consolidate a clear identity, a competitive car in all lands, a complementary pilots, and a flexible work structure, capable of learning from their mistakes without repeating them. In this context, Monaco not only represents an opportunity to add good points. It is the symbolic validation of a path that began with many unknowns and that, for the first time in a long time, offers clear answers. Ferrari is demonstrating that he does not want to limit himself to compete. He wants to dominate. And he is trying to do with intelligence, patience, and especially with a definite direction. The fear of being wrong has been replaced by the will to innovate and, when necessary, rectify. That operational humility, so rare in teams with such history, can be the true foundation of this new era. Because if something has demonstrated Formula One over the years, it is that the titles are not won alone with a good car. They win when an entire structure finds coherence between their talent, their technology, and their purpose. And Ferrari in 2025 begins to show signs of having reached that perfect alignment. Formula One rarely grants second opportunities, and when it does, it is because something truly exceptional is being developed. The case of Ferrari in Monaco 2025 is not a simple history of momentary redemption. It is the prologue of something much bigger. Because what we saw in the streets of the Principality was not a technical coincidence or a blow of passenger luck. It was the convergence of brave decisions, humble corrections, and a hunger accumulated for years of disappointments. The SF-25, refined to the last millimeter, has ceased to be an experimental project to become a tangible threat. Hamilton, emotionally revitalized and supported by a machine that finally begins to respond, no longer runs to adapt. Run to attack. His performance in Monaco practices is more than a signal. It is a direct warning to McLaren, Red Bull, and anyone who has discouraged Ferrari prematurely in the fight for the championship. And this is where the true storm looms. Because if Ferrari manages to transfer this level of technical precision and emotional synchrony to the classification and, eventually, to the race, the order established in the grid could stagger. It's not just about points, it's about momentum. Of that intangible but lethal impulse that transforms a team into an unstoppable phenomenon.